What color are the reflective studs between a motorway and a slip road? Green. Your car gets a puncture while you're driving on the motorway. What should you do when you've stopped on the hard shoulder? Use an emergency telephone and call for help. What color are the reflective studs between the hard shoulder and the left-hand lane of a motorway? Red. On a 3-lane motorway, which lane should you use if there's no traffic ahead? Left. How should you rejoin the motorway after a breakdown on the hard shoulder? Build up speed on the hard shoulder before looking for a safe gap in the traffic. You're on a smart motorway. What does it mean when a mandatory speed limit is displayed above the hard shoulder? The hard shoulder can be used as a running lane. You stop on the hard shoulder of a motorway and use the emergency telephone. Where's the best place to wait for help to arrive? Well away from the carriageway. Where should you stop to rest if you feel tired while you're traveling along a motorway? At the nearest service area. How do smart motorways prevent traffic bunching? By using variable speed limits. Which vehicles should use the left-hand lane on a 3-lane motorway? Any vehicle that isn't overtaking. You have stopped in an emergency refuge area. What must you do before you rejoin the carriageway? Use the emergency telephone. What would you expect to find at a contraflow system on a motorway? Lower speed limits. Where are amber reflective studs found on a motorway? Between the central reservation and the carriageway. Why is it particularly important to check your vehicle before making a long motorway journey? Continuous high speeds increase the risk of your vehicle breaking down. You're on a motorway. What must you do if there's a red cross showing above every lane? Stop and wait. How should you position yourself when you use the emergency telephone on a motorway? Face the oncoming traffic. Your vehicle has broken down on a motorway. What should you do if you aren't able to get onto the hard shoulder? Switch on your hazard warning lights. What's the national speed limit on motorways for cars and motorcycles? 70 miles per hour. On a smart motorway, what does this sign mean? Use all the lanes, including the hard shoulder. What should you do when going through a contraflow system on a motorway? Keep a good distance from the vehicle ahead. Your vehicle breaks down on a motorway and you need to call for help. Why might it be better to use an emergency roadside telephone rather than a mobile phone? It allows easy location by the emergency services. You're traveling along a motorway. When are you allowed to overtake on the left? When in queues and traffic to your right is moving more slowly than you are. When would you use an emergency refuge area on a smart motorway? In cases of emergency or breakdown. When should you use the left-hand lane of a motorway? When the road ahead is clear. You're joining a motorway from a slip road. How should you deal with traffic already on the motorway? Match your speed to traffic in the left-hand lane and filter into a safe gap. When are you allowed to stop on a motorway? When you're signaled to do so by traffic signals. What color are the reflective studs between the lanes on a motorway? White. You're traveling along a motorway. Where would you find a crawler or climbing lane? On a steep gradient. What should you do when you're approaching roadworks on a motorway? Obey the speed limit. What helps to reduce traffic bunching on a motorway? Variable speed limits. Which vehicles aren't allowed to use the right-hand lane of a 3-lane motorway? Vehicles towing a trailer. You're traveling in the left-hand lane of a 3-lane motorway. How should you react to traffic joining from a slip road? Adjust your speed or change lane if you can do so safely. Which vehicles are prohibited from using the motorway? Powered mobility scooters. What restrictions apply to people who have a provisional driving license? They can't drive unaccompanied. What's the speed limit for a car towing a trailer on a motorway? 60 miles per hour. What should you do if you're driving on a motorway and you miss the exit that you wanted to take? Carry on to the next exit. You're driving on the motorway. Which lane should you get into well before you reach your exit? The left-hand lane. You're driving on a motorway and have to slow down suddenly due to a hazard ahead. How can you warn drivers behind the hazard? Switch on your hazard warning lights. Your vehicle has broken down on a motorway. In which direction should you walk to find the nearest emergency telephone? In the direction shown on the marker posts. You're driving on a motorway. What does it mean if the car in front shows its hazard warning lights for a short time? Traffic ahead is slowing or stopping suddenly. Your vehicle broke down on the hard shoulder of a motorway, but has now been repaired. How should you rejoin the main carriageway? Gain speed on the hard shoulder before moving out onto the carriageway. You're on a motorway that isn't subject to smart motorway regulations. When should you use the hard shoulder? When you're stopping in an emergency. When may you stop on a motorway? In an emergency or breakdown. You're on a 3-lane motorway. Which lane are you in if there are red reflective studs on your left and white ones to your right? In the left-hand lane. How should you use the lanes on a motorway? Keep to the left-hand lane unless you're overtaking. You're in the right-hand lane of a 3-lane motorway. What do these overhead signs mean? Move to the left and reduce your speed to 50 miles per hour. You're towing a trailer along a 3-lane motorway. When may you use the right-hand lane? When there are lane closures. What should you do while you're driving or riding along a motorway? Look much further ahead than you would on other roads. Traffic officers operate on motorways and some primary routes in England and Wales. What are they authorized to do? Stop and direct anyone on a motorway. What's the national speed limit for a car or motorcycle on a motorway? 70 miles per hour. What do these motorway signs mean? They're countdown markers to the next exit. What should you do immediately after joining a motorway? Stay in the left-hand lane. Why is it important to make full use of the slip road as you join a motorway? To allow you to fit safely into the traffic flow in the left-hand lane. Your vehicle breaks down on a motorway and you manage to stop on the hard shoulder. What should you do if you use your mobile phone to call for help? Check your location from the nearest marker posts beside the hard shoulder. You're on a smart motorway. What does it mean if a red cross is showing above the hard shoulder and mandatory speed limits above all other lanes? The hard shoulder is for emergency or breakdown use only. You're on a smart motorway. What does it mean when a red cross is displayed above the hard shoulder? You must not travel in this lane. When would you use the right-hand lane on a 3-lane motorway? When you're overtaking.